All right, I have 7 o'clock. It looks like all of our board members are here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. It takes a couple minutes to get started, so if there are some members of GSX that are not here yet, they'll still have a couple of minutes because I have some stuff to read. I'd like to welcome everybody to the June 9th, 2020 Select Board meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Before I do so, I need to kind of take attendance and go through a script. As a preliminary matter, I am Jennifer Thomas. I am the chair of the Select Board. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. So members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. So Peter Carlson.
Peter Carlson here.
Doreen DeFazio.
Doreen DeFazio here.
Donna Stock.
Donna Stock here.
Ed Prisby.
Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tim McInerney.
McInerney here.
John Allen.
John Allen present.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Michelle McGregor.
Affirmative.
Casey Killam.
Here.
John Grant.
Here.
Matthew Welter.
Matthew Welter here.
Okay. I have everybody from GSX. Is that all? Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting of the Select Board is convening by Zoom, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to share your screen of your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials have been provided to the members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. We are now turning to the first item of our agenda, but before we get there, there's a couple ground rules. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each to provide a comment, question, or motion. Please hold off until your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. And please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If you wish to engage with other members, please do so through me. After all members have spoken, I will check the Q&A function and see if there are any questions that haven't been covered yet. And all votes will be taken by roll call. All right. First We have some announcements. Ed, are you in this meeting?
Yes, I am.
Are you going to come on video or are you going to leave that up?
I don't know. Is that a new policy?
Um, I would just like to see everybody participate here.
If you want to see my smiling face, here I am.
Thank you. I have some announcements. Town meeting will be held on June 20th, starting at 9 a.m. on the high school athletic field. The rain date will be June 21st. Details are on the town website and a town-wide mailer will be sent in the next week with the full details. So please watch for this mailer. Please remember the Grafton Strong account. If you or someone you know is in need of COVID relief assistance, you can access an application for funds on the town's website by clicking on the red COVID banner. I don't believe we have any public comments. Peter, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. We have some correspondence. I'll read it later. Thank you.
Okay. The first item on the schedule is coronavirus update. Tim.
So quickly, to get today, no new cases were reported. There are still a total of 93 in Grafton. There was a reporting issue with the Mavis system for the state reporting, and there was some address. People we thought were here were not really in Grafton, so those are being rectified. At some point, we probably want to get briefed again by the Alliance relative to that issue, but we can do that at a future meeting, hopefully after town meeting. Everybody's aware of the phase 2 implementation. We have started to have limited staff. Our position A for returning to the building, if people can be successful working from home and keep their departments successful and robust, they can continue to work from home. But if they find themselves coming back, there is a COVID policy that everybody must comply with, read, sign, watch some videos with their department heads, read the CDC guidance, and so forth. So we are limited now with just staff only. Perhaps in a week, we might be able to do appointments provided the guidance from the state doesn't change and the numbers don't change overall. The library and COA, kind of external to us, they're on probably a 2-week lag curve behind us. And we'll have only limited services going forward, but probably on a 2-week lag basis from us with their own unique set of standards and policies that they'll adopt moving forward, starting with transportation for the Council on Aging and then the library, starting with book returns and so forth. So they haven't had any of those things done for over 90 days. So we want to get people's feet on the ground, learn from our mistakes if we have any, opening up the municipal center, and then, avoid those things in other places. The Board of Health continues to meet and discuss concerns and offer guidance on a variety of issues and topics. They have a weekly call, and then obviously their regular board meetings. They're trying hard to offer safe guidance and approvals for businesses like restaurants to open safely on a limited basis under phase 1 and phase 2. So that is, that's all I have for COVID-19 update.
Thank you. Do the members have any questions for Tim, Peter?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Tim, could you give us an update, just in your estimation, how did the permit process go for these businesses to reopen? I know it was done on a very expedited manner, but could you share with the board and public, just in your estimation, how that process went?
Well, you guys took one hurdle out of the way relative to modification of premises for the liquor license. You basically said, hey, we want you to open. If you can do it safely with the chief's approval, we'll remove that barrier. So everybody has that ability to do. And now planning, if they had a site plan approval by planning or a variance through ZBA that needs to be modified, they had to get back on one of those agendas. They talked to staff to make sure they were going to cover all the ground. And I believe some approvals even happened last night in planning, but I haven't touched base with Chris on that issue. But my estimation is the businesses are happy to be able to work with the town to get back and find compliance. No one likes regulation, so that's why the board was progressive in removing one of the hurdles. And I think we signaled to those elected or appointed boards that we're serious about getting open and opening safely. And I think those boards and committees have taken that signal to heart.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move to Pine Street, 8 Pine Street. I want to welcome GSX Ventures and O'Connell Development Group to give us a presentation to tell us about their plan for 8 Pine Street. I understand you have some slides, so you'll be sharing your screen at some point. So Michelle, are you the lead on this? Should I turn it over to you for, oh, Casey is.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're turning it over to Casey, but thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
so-
Jen, can I just start to give people who are watching context
Sure.
and maybe some more history for the board? So GSX is a seasoned veteran relative to presenting and developing projects, as you'll see. But I just want the community to know that this process of us acquiring this 8 acres of land, 8.8 acres on Pine Street near the MBTA station started probably 2 years ago with a lot of help from the state legislative delegation. It was really prompted by the governor's Open for Business initiative, identifying land, state land that they weren't using as robustly as they could, and they were identifying sites that they could offload basically to get it into the market for private development. So there was one site on Route 30, which went to Mass Development, and then we entered into a sales partnership with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where we split the proceeds from the sale with the state. So this 8 acres that has 1 or 2 buildings that are fairly dilapidated on it, we took possession after a town meeting vote, which happened in May last year, and we took possession in August of 2019 from the state. Right after that, we started to work on a bid specification we used to solicit proposals, like the one you'll hear tonight. We went out to bid in January, and we had bid proposals due in March. We pushed it back till April. We had 4 proposals that came back. They were all good. 3 were very competitive out of the 4. And we ultimately landed on GSX for really 6 main reasons. The number of units that they could provide, the overall investment, the timing, the sales price, the lack of contingencies. When we did our RFP, we said, hey, what will the contingencies be? What will you need from the town? Some of those contingencies from other proposers were tax increment financing and affordable housing trust subsidization to get their affordable units up. So the lack of contingencies was a big piece. And then obviously their success in other projects was another driving factor. So we took the proposals in, we did this review based on all these criteria, and they ended up with the highest rating. And then we had them come in and give a presentation to staff where we asked some particular questions. And now we want to recommend from a staff perspective to the board to listen to GSX proposal as we've heard it and as we've reviewed it, and, you know, award the project for development to GSX at the end, at the conclusion of this, which only signals 2 things. One is we're going to move to phase 2, basically, to have a purchase and sale signed between the parties. And obviously we have town meeting on Saturday, which would give us authorization to sell this parcel. So there'll be some presentation around that authorization as well. So kind of a 3-step process with you guys kind of awarding, entering into a purchase and sale, which is contingent upon town meeting approval, then town meeting approval, and then this group can go through the due diligence. So having given you kind of the background of a piece of property that was state-owned, not a lot of tax revenue, 0, to something that's going to be meaningful and robust from a tax perspective, this is kind of a big deal, and it also meets a lot of our marks for affordable housing units along MBTA commuter rail station. So having said that, we're going to have Casey and or Michelle go through their presentation, but I just want to at least lay the groundwork for how we got to where we are.
Thank you, Tim. Casey, take it away.
Thank you, Tim. Just a little background like I gave in the last presentation. I'm really excited about this project. My name is Casey Killam. I actually grew up about a half a mile away from this site in Shrewsbury, just over the line on Cherry Street. So I grew up hiking in the woods and trails that used to be where now Centec Boulevard is. And I remember as a kid asking my parents what this building was and what was going to be there someday. And I feel very blessed to work with GSX and O'Connell Development so that now we can really bring life back to this building. I've seen it before it collapsed up until what it is today. And I think what we've put together is something that's going to be really exciting for the town. So with that, I would like to share my screen and go through our PowerPoint. So here's just an initial rendering of the site. This is something that we're really excited about. We spent quite a bit of time working on, and we hope this really draws some interest to the project. Here's a summary, a schedule for what we're hoping to go over tonight. Looks like we're skip number one. We're going to jump into our firm representatives. Unfortunately, Jim Sullivan of O'Connell Development was not able to make it tonight, but he sent a small video clip that I'll be able to play for you.
Casey, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can people that aren't talking, can they just, there's a little bit of background noise. Can everybody make sure they're muted? Thank you. Ed, can you mute yourself?
Good evening.
Are we ready to go?
Yes, thank you.
No problem.
My name is Jim Sullivan, and I am the president of O'Connell Development Group. O'Connell Development Group is an experienced commercial real estate developer and a multifamily developer. O'Connell Development Group is a wholly owned subsidiary of the O'Connell Companies, a privately held firm that is based in Massachusetts, with its headquarters in Holyoke and another office in Franklin. I am also the president of the O'Connell Companies and its majority owner. We have been in business since 1879, some 141 years ago. I began working at O'Connell's in 1982, over 38 years ago. I've been asked to provide a profile of our company and its history in 3 to 4 minutes. That might be a difficult challenge, but I think I can do the best I can, and I'll get it done. In addition to O'Connell Development Group, our company profile includes 2 major construction companies: Daniel O'Connell Sons, who performs both building and civil construction, and Western Builders, who concentrates solely in the building sector. A property management company, Appleton Corp., a hydroelectric power division called O'Connell Energy Group, and a biosolids management company, New England Fertilizer Company, who operates plants in Quincy, Minneapolis, Detroit, West Palm Beach, and in Cumberland, Maryland. We have been developing, building, owning, and managing multifamily residential units since the 1970s. We still own and manage many of those units today. We have worked on projects that dot the map throughout the Northeast, from Rose Wharf in Boston to significant projects for many of the colleges and universities, such as MIT, WPI, Harvard, Dartmouth, UMass, UConn, Yale, Vassar, to name just a few, as well as bridges, dams, airports, and wastewater treatment plants throughout the Northeast. Appleton manages over 2,000 units of housing and also conducts commercial property management services throughout the New England region. Closest by would be 50 Prescott Street in Worcester, and we've also done property management services at UMass Medical. Western has constructed numerous multifamily residential projects, and in fact, is currently constructing 6 projects totaling over $100 million in value. The closest one to this site is in Hudson, Mass., a project we are doing in association with John Grant's group. With a firm that is 141 years old, there isn't much we haven't seen before. We are proud of the great reputation we have earned. We are known as true builders, problem solvers, ethical, fair, and determined. In my time at O'Connell's, we have put in place just under $10 billion worth of projects. Now that's pretty impressive, but it's always the next project that gets us excited. And that's this project in North Grafton. I am born, raised, and educated in Massachusetts. My wife and I maintain our own residences due to work requirements, so I spend about half my time in Lancaster, which is just about 30 minutes up the road from the project site. We are local, for sure. We really look forward to having the opportunity to work with you on this project, from taking our idea and transforming it into an asset, and having the O'Connell name associated with this very important project for the town of North Grafton. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Now I'm going to share screens for jumping back to our PowerPoint. Next, I'd like to introduce John Grant, who runs GSX Ventures.
Thanks for inviting us here tonight. We've been very, very excited about this project and this process for some time. My name is John Grant. I'm the president of GSX. I am a licensed architect and planner. I've been developing real estate, I guess, since 1988. GSX has been around since 1988, which is not 147 years, but seems like a long time to me. We started, I've been president. GSX is doing 2 projects currently in Massachusetts. We're doing a $45 million assisted living and independent living project in Hudson, Massachusetts. And in that project, we not only found the site and developed the site, we also did all the zoning work and created a brand new zoning classification in Hudson for assisted living and independent living. We're also working in Amherst right now, building a multifamily housing project with affordable housing units, which is under construction as well right now. Both projects we are doing in conjunction with Western Builders. We've had a long and successful relationship with Casey and with O'Connell through both these projects. GSX is a kind of an interesting company. It's a vertically integrated design and development firm. Almost everything we do from finding sites and essentially finding projects that we can have a win-win relationship with cities to build more or less urban projects. Our specialties are student housing, senior housing, assisted living and independent living, transit-oriented mixed-use developments, and also medical office buildings. We've been really interested in this project and this site since we saw it, and we think we've come up with a plan and a proposal that makes a lot of sense and actually follows a lot of the things that that the town was looking for in its pro forma and in its request for proposals and the transit-oriented village documents that you sent out originally about this project and this site. We're looking forward to working with you and creating a project that everyone's proud of. Thanks.
And next, I'd like to introduce Michelle McGregor, and she will go over the org chart.
Thanks, Casey. Good evening, everyone. We're so excited to be working not only with the town of Grafton, but also the community on this project. As you can see from this org chart, this is our comprehensive team. This is a team that we have worked together in the past. We've worked very well together, and we have had a lot of joint success, and we know we will have that going forward. You've already been introduced to both GSX, the GSX and O'Connell development team, and also our partner with O'Connell, Western Developers, and Chris Boigno, who is the president or vice president of Western Construction, who's doing both the Hudson and Amherst project, as John just outlined. So our whole comprehensive team is there. We only would like to highlight one group, which is Ty & Bond. They are a very strong engineering firm with whom we've worked. O'Connell has worked with numerous times and especially has experience in state hospitals in Massachusetts. So we're excited to introduce you to our team. You can ask us any questions, but in the order of time, I'm gonna turn it over to the next speaker so that we can get through the presentation and y'all can ask questions. Thank you.
And now we're gonna lead into a project overview, and John Grant will walk us through that.
Thanks.
You're on mute.
Thanks, Casey. What you're seeing in front of you here is the is a view from the southern end of the site, 8 acres, and we have taken the site and looked at its attributes. And when we started the process, we toured the site and we made some decisions. One is that the site has a sloping side on the north and a very dramatic steep side on the south. We looked at that as being an advantage and looked at that as being a place to separate and take a road that we aligned with Centennial and drive it through the site to serve both our sites and also the Job Corps Center. We created a building that we think is actually very dense, but because we used a parking garage, a vertical parking garage, we took all the parking off the site. In fact, the buildings on this site cover less than 35% of the site, which is pretty dramatic. Most of the site is in green space and is staying green. That also removes a lot of the water runoff and purification issues for the project, and also creates covered parking for the residents, which is, I think, a pretty attractive feature of this project. I don't know that there's anything else close by that has covered parking. The project itself, as you can see up there on the left, contains 306 housing units, ranging from efficiencies to 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. Those units are spread through the project. There is 10,000 square feet of community center space, which will contain fitness centers and clubhouse space. There are a wide range of outdoor activity spaces, including pool and hot tub, as well as outdoor walking paths. The building we have directed to be designed as a very, very energy efficient building. As you can see on the roof there, we are doing solar collection on the roof, and we're hoping to power a considerable amount of this building through solar collection. That building on the north side of the site is specifically all residential with an activity space towards the intersection there for leasing and for our community activities. On the other side of the site, the southern side of the site, we have built a retail center and a parking deck. That parking deck and retail center exclusively serve the retail needs of the community. And the retail center also has street front visibility on Pine Street. As you can see, it's there on the right-hand side. One of the things that we did beyond that is when we evaluated the site originally, we realized that the existing buildings were in pretty bad shape. And some of the things that scared us about those buildings were the age of the structural systems, as well as the possibility that there could be some sort of fungus or any type of bacteria inside those buildings into the wall systems that we just didn't want to deal with. So we thought would be an attractive way of doing this is to take the vocabulary of those buildings and create a building that pays homage to those vocabularies, and also have a space inside these buildings that has a small museum that talks about the building that was there and about the site as it was originally. And that's what you see before you. Those two buildings there are brick with a stone base. They incorporate the keystones and the flat arches and the slate roofs and mansards, and also those 4 chimneys that are reminiscent of the major administrative buildings. They also encompass a number of courtyards and outdoor spaces, so there's lots of walking paths. This is a shot of the pool and hot tub area right off the clubhouse that looks across at the retail space and creates a private outdoor venue for the residents. We'd like to take you on a tour down Pine Street from the north to the south. As you're going down Pine Street, you'd be seeing this project from the street set back quite a distance. There's a green buffer, and of course we'll be planting new trees and creating a landscape edge across there, and also a separate access way around the entire site for police and fire vehicles, any need for emergency access. So the site is really serviced by the main road and also by our service road around the back. All the parking for the residential is in that parking garage, and that is around the back of the site. This shows you right towards the center where the crossover for Centennial comes through, and that is the clubhouse right there with that curved end, and that is the parking area and the leasing area, and that opens out into the courtyard in the middle, which essentially has the pool and the hot tub and outdoor rec spaces there. But actually, there's walking paths all the way around the building. This shows you the retail center. As you can see, the retail is all storefront facing Pine Street, which makes the retail, gives them a face and signage on the street, which will also be attractive for tenants, because tenants always want to be on the street and have them on the street, their signs on the street. By separating these two, the residential from the retail, we also limited any conflicts for parking and things like that that happen. As you can see here, the street that we've created that services all the way through back to the Job Corps Center. If you come in and turn to the right, immediately you go onto the parking deck, which goes down and around, but services all the retail clients initially with the first 2 layers. And then below that, there are parking spaces that are covered that would service the MBTA and provide additional, I believe somewhere around 80 to 100 parking spaces for the MBTA, and also for additional parking for tenants who have cars, additional cars that they want to park in the garage and have covered. As you can see, if you turn to the left, you go back, you drive there and go right into the parking garage, which goes up 5 stories. That's all precast. If you take a look at the corridor system there, you can see that the parking garage allows you to park on the level that you live on. As a result, every one of our residents will be very, very close to the entry into the level that they live on. They don't have to travel in an elevator up and down from a parking lot. And as well, if there's any people with handicapped issues, et cetera, they'll be able to wheel right in from that garage, right onto their floor level and right into their building. So it's a very accessible building, a very short distance for people to walk to their units. Here's a landscape plan, taking a look at that. As you can see, we have trails that we're taking through the project. We've created a dog park up in the upper corner there, and we'll have a dog run back there. Each one of these courtyards will have a different theme to it. One will have a playground in it. One will have probably some strength training areas in it. And of course, the center courtyard has the pool in it, but in the clubhouse, which is the first floor of that bottom finger there, you'll have a fitness center, you'll have offices, you'll have meeting rooms. You have a lot of things that are pretty much indicative of first class, Class A apartment project. And to the right, you can see you have 12,000 square feet of retail space with a parking deck of 180 parking spaces. So that's pretty much it. The retail space also allows a crosswalk over to the sidewalk that takes you right to the MBTA station. So that works out very well too. You can come right across the street, roll down into the MBTA station, either across the bridge or down the ramp to go to Worcester. As you can see, there's a breakdown of units here. There's 71 junior suites, which are efficiencies. There's 164 one-bedrooms. There's 124 two-bedroom units, and there's 24 three-bedroom units. So you have a total of 306 units of apartment. And you have 471 parking spaces. As you can see above, you have 12,000 square feet of retail and 180 parking spaces. So we think the property is correctly parked and actually has a lot of space in it, extra space for the MBTA and the expansion of that station. So there's a lot more usage, and that actually helps the retailers, because some of these people, if we have the right tenants in there, will be getting their breakfast cup of coffee here, or coming home and having dinner on the rooftop deck that we envisioned here. Casey?
All right, next, I'm sorry, I'm on mute. Next, we're gonna have Matt Welter that goes over our construction budget and some of the positive effects financially for the community.
Thanks, Casey, and thank you to the group here tonight. It's a pleasure to meet everyone and to present our project. Very excited about it. During our last presentation, I think I made a quip about a lot has changed since the RFP submission date on April 2nd, and I think it's probably even fair to say that a lot has changed since our last presentation on the 18th. But in terms of our timeline and our structure, we're still committed to what we've proposed in the technical proposal and the cost proposal, and we're not looking to compress or change or reallocate any of the timing allotment that's associated with either one of those timelines. And so we can revisit that once we get to some of the more detailed scheduling. And but I thought that was something that was at least worthy of another mention. So as Casey mentioned, this is the overall construction budget, sources and uses. And as Jim Sullivan mentioned in his introduction, one of the advantages of having an in-house construction firm is we have access to construction data that we feel is relevant both to the geographic region and also to this market specifically. So when we price one of these projects, we have confidence that what we're proposing is both financeable and constructible. And how that relates to the capital markets is that it allows potential investors and lenders to be comfortable with a project this size. We did include a letter of interest from one of our longtime lending partners based here in Holyoke in Western Mass, People's Bank. They are one of many banks that we will look to secure both construction acquisition financing. But that's something that we'll probably pursue more diligently once we get into the entitlement phase. Typically, we find that lenders are looking for a little bit more visibility towards the final approval so that they know what their collateral is and essentially what they're lending against. So that is something that we will diligently pursue once we get to the entitlement phase. And as Tim mentioned in his kind of setup for the project, this is a project that will be completely privately funded. We're not looking for any municipal financing instruments, so no TIFs, no pilots, and also nothing from the state or federal level in terms of low-income housing tax credits or historic tax credits. And we feel that that allows us to bring the product quicker to market and kind of compresses some of the schedule compared to the relative approval process that comes with those type of financing instruments. So here quickly is just a potential impact schedule to the town. The left side gives a 10-year untrended stabilized value, which as you can see is approximately $56 million. And on the right hand column is a trended version of the potential tax impact to the town when combined with the $4 million one-time fees on an untrended basis here at about $14.5 million, and on a trended basis about $15.5 million. So this is the schedule that was mentioned briefly. The bottom half is just a graphical representation of the schedule. So this has not been updated since we made that presentation on the 18th. So for consistency purposes, we did have to make some assumptions on when we'll get through kind of the selection and the negotiation of the PSA. So for purposes here, we've assumed a execution date of approximately June 30th, which would then kick off the 4-month due diligence period that would run until October 31st. And during that time, we would be expending real money and as far as understanding the environmental, soil, geotechnical, and those type of things. The entitlement period, again, part of the cost proposal would run another 6 months, and then we would expect to close on the property at approximately May 30th, 2021. We would kick off site work July of that year. Vertical construction would commence 4 months after that, and we would look at a rent commencement date of January 1st, 2023.
And next up, I was going to speak about, sorry, it's an echo. I was going to speak about the effects of the COVID-19 on the setup of our site and also on the market as well. So the implementation stages of reflecting COVID-19, what it really comes down to for us is we have the same business model going into this if there wasn't the concern about the virus, which is the most effective way to draw the best retailers is to build the retail residential section of the project. And then work through that. We want to create a demand, not that there already isn't a demand in North Grafton, but create a strong demand centrally located on the site. Once we start building a critical mass, then we work into the parking deck, which is for the retail plus the MBTA and the shell structure of the retail. We are really excited about this to bring on the right retailers. The retailers aren't the essential backbone to the projects. We want to work and reach out to the community to figure out who North Grafton would like to see in our retail segment and make sure that that happens. We don't want to just place some national retailers and just say, this is what you get. We really want to see what's the right fit for the community and also for the adapting environment. You'll notice that some of the design elements in the project, as John had alluded to, are really helpful for some of the methods and some of the ways we're going to probably all cooperate together in the future. So by the residential being separated from the retail, there's that divide there. So there's separate parking, there's a separate segment for that. And also with the open roof deck. I mean, who doesn't like a roof deck as a place to eat? But also we're finding that that is what is a desirable demand for retailers in the community. Them being able to utilize that, especially in this tough time, is an important element that John and the team were able to integrate. Next, we talked about the ways that the town of Grafton can help ensure our success. So this is a partnership. We're going into this and saying not what we're going to provide you. We're basing everything in our development on what you had outlined in the North Grafton Village District. Going forwards, to be successful, we would really need your help, and we'd like to be introduced to any community groups, boards, etc. I know Grafton's one of the great communities that offers a Thursday, every Thursday there's a meeting to talk about developments. If there's a way that we can integrate into some sort of schedule so that we have an open line of communication with the community, we'd love to have that. Also, I know the town of Grafton has worked very hard for, I believe it's over a decade now, to work with the MBTA and other government agencies to make this project happen. Any introductions to the right people to make sure we're working in their best interest and in a timely fashion would be great. Utility easements, that's the next one. I know Tim had mentioned when we met that the ability to communicate with the DPW and any other parties would not be an issue. So the introductions to the right people to make that happen would be really great. And another thought that we had was, this is a really big project. This is going to be a really big, exciting thing for the town of Grafton. And maybe there's an option to create a dedicated board that's a point of contacts for us to communicate to, be the center point for the community to voice concerns if there are any. We're hoping they're not, but everyone has an opinion. We'd love for them to be heard in a way that makes sense that they can get through to the right team members. And we've already gone over our engineering and architectural firms to be used. And at the end of the presentation, we'll go on a little bit more about that as well. So next up, John is going to speak about the neighboring project in Hudson that we're doing. That's the assisted living.
Thanks, Casey. This is our latest project in Hudson. It was an 8-acre site similar to the one you're seeing here right now. Holds a 92-bed assisted living facility and a 60-bed independent, 60 apartment, I should say, independent living facility with underground parking. The project was one that took about 2 years to get through the process of getting it zoned and approved because the town of Hudson didn't have a zoning code didn't actually include assisted living in their zoning code. So they had to go all the way to the beginning and create a zoning code, zoning classification for assisted living. The town worked hand in hand with us through this process, and the project has become a great reality. We've gotten a lot of support, and we've created, I think, a pretty handsome project there right on the corner of the Washington Avenue and also the extension that goes to 495. So this is a bird's eye view. The H-shaped building in the front is the assisted living with memory care, and the T-shaped building in the back is the independent living. It is opening, I believe, in August of this year.
We want to go into a little bit about one of our strategic partners, Ty & Bond, who's the engineering firm that Connell Development has quite a bit of experience with. Being a local guy, I thought it'd be important to talk about some of their experience in a project that's nearby that we've all seen come through, and it's another exciting one for the reuse of a former state hospital in Westboro. So Ty and Bond, who's going to be our engineering partner, they actually were these are just some services that they covered on that project. So although we have not directly redeveloped a former state hospital, mental hospital, we are excited to partner with someone so that we're going into this with our eyes wide open. We only partner with people that add value to this experience and ensure our success. So we think that this is a great opportunity, and we just wanted to show that just one of our partners that they've definitely done this before. And with that, I believe we are all set.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm going to ask the members if they have any questions. Ed, if you can please take that picture down again. Thank you. Are there any questions from our members? Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that presentation. First of all, I'm really excited that you came here tonight and presented this. This is to me, a very optimistic development deal for 8 Pine Street. I just wanted to just ask a couple questions with regards to total source of funds and part of the private and/or applicant equity. I mean, is there any type of state or federal grants that were applied to this project and are contingent upon meeting certain benchmarks?
I may answer that. No, so there's no public funds that will be contingent on approval to move this project forward. It's going to be entirely privately funded. So equity sources typically would come from private equity and like I said before, not from LIHTC or historic tax credits.
Ed.
Yeah, thank you. So in the plan for, I suppose to phrase it the best way, phasing your tenants here, you're looking at the residential first and then the parking and then the retail, right? That's fair to say that was part of the presentation.
It's not going to be as broken up or demised as that. It's going to be a fluid process. Part of it is the street that cuts through the middle of the site. We need to make sure that we work with the Jobs Corp to retain access for their project, and trying to develop a piece of real estate on both sides at exactly the same time has its complications construction wise. So it's not like we're going to build the residential and then stop everything, wait for the market to be right, and then do the retail portion. It's going to be a fluid process, but we're going to focus on developing the residential, retain access for the Jobs Corp. And then once we're at the right point with that, we have a critical mass, start working on the other site. It's impossible not to do site work for both projects, but it's a stage.
So I guess that was my question. So when you're developing a project like this, you've got a certain amount of square feet that you're probably going to dedicate to retail. And if you can't get the retail tenants in there later on, that's going to be a problem because, you know, not only have you got that space dedicated to the retail, but that was part of your model. Are you sure that you're going to be able to get enough critical mass for tenants at the rental rate that you're looking for to be able to draw those retail tenants in?
I guess I can speak to that really quick. We're definitely confident in that. Absolutely. I think that the North Grafton, if I'm sure you've seen the MBTA station in the mornings, you've seen in the evenings. There is already a mass of people that come through North Grafton as a conduit to other retail centers. So what we're looking to do is to find the right retailers that just want to capture a little bit. They want to provide a place to grab a coffee on their way home or on their way to work, or find a place for the family to meet for dinner when one of the parents comes through on the train ride. So I don't foresee an issue at all. My background is in commercial brokerage. I really think we're going to find the right people for this. It might be a combination of national retailers plus some local family-run businesses. And it's because of what we're going through right now with the pandemic, it's not a clear cut that we have a list of tenants that we're going to run through and call up the national brokers and say, hey, we have a new spot for you. We're going to use this as an opportunity to pick the right people. And so I don't think we'll have an issue at all.
Okay.
And just to,
That's also a fact that you've got an inherent group of people in tech companies who have no services right now, and Tufts. I mean, if you gave people the choice of being able to spend 5 minutes or even to walk or ride their bike to a place to have lunch or dinner, and beyond that, even beyond the food, you've got people who have all sorts of other businesses, people who have basically nail salons and hairdressing, and retail is going to be a whole gambit of things that they're going to find this site attractive, because you have a lot of people there and there's no services immediately there. And that's why this becomes sort of a village. So
that actually, John, thank you. And that actually leads to my follow-up question, which is you've got 360 units. Are you confident you're going to be able to draw the tenants at the rental rate that you want without the retail being there first, right? So there's a sort of chicken and the egg part of this that's difficult for any development.
Well, if I can address that, I mean, we know the demand is there for the residential. The residential right now, and compared to other markets and the markets surrounding us, there's a tremendous demand for that. You also have 75 units of this residential that are affordable housing. But beyond that, I believe that since there is no other residential project currently that has covered parking throughout, and there is no other wrap project around here, that you're gonna enjoy a fairly large market segment of people that want the best housing around. And even seniors will be drawn to this because of the fact that they'll have parking that's covered and they'll be right adjacent to their house. So they have to walk upstairs or get in an elevator. They'll be parking right on the same level as their. So this is a multi-generational project. It's going to attract a lot of different people. Beyond that, in terms of financing, transit-based projects, we're doing one in Colorado right now, in Lakewood, Colorado, are pretty much one of the most bulletproof things right now in the economy. You have a tech group, you have a train track that goes to Boston and Worcester, and you're going to find a population that's going to want to be there, living there, and it really assists in a lot of different aspects of this project. Its marketability, and we think it's going to be a pretty handsome project too, one that is a village nestled in the woods. So we're pretty excited about it. I don't think we have the slightest thought that it's not going to be successful.
Doreen?
Thank you, everybody. A great presentation and really exciting project. I just want to piggyback on some comments and questions that Ed had first, and then a follow-up. So he mentioned Tufts and the MBTA as far as relationships. So you mentioned in the presentation that you have relationships with a number of colleges and universities, and just thinking about getting the right type of retail in there, the right type of residents in there. Will you be partnering with Tufts and or MBTA to gather more information as well? And then I have a follow-up as well.
Sure, I'll add to that one. So for us to do this project, like I had said from the start, we really need to integrate with the right parties and make sure their voices are heard. Tufts is one of the most prominent parts of North Grafton. And every time we've attended a meeting to discuss this project and some of the exciting developments that are going on in North Grafton or in Grafton in general, Tufts has been there, and they've been a voice to be heard about what they're working on. For us to do this project and truly be successful, we need to speak with Tufts. We need to speak with any contacts you have at the MBTA and figure out how we can work together on this. And it's not saying that we've gone into this and defined and said we have to have a certain number of units allotted to Tufts. It wasn't like that. There's going to be a conversation and a relationship built with them that we can see what are their needs, does that fit the project, and how can we work together. But it's not something that we went in and said, we're going to allot student housing, this is what we're going for at all.
Great. So my follow-up question to that has to do with public outreach. And Casey, you mentioned maybe the town putting together a dedicated board, which I like that suggestion. And certainly for municipal building projects, the town of Grafton has always had a building committee I'm just curious, in the past, historically, what have you done? What has been successful? Maybe beyond a dedicated board, or a better question may be, how or what is the line of contact going to be for this project to make sure that all residents that want to know what's going on, and or if the timeline changes, how are we going to do that? And how can we help do that?
Sure. Well, one of the things that GSX has always done is created a landing page website that gives updates. So anyone in the community can log on and see what that is. What's important with a successful website, though, is not just putting a landing page that people go to and it looks the same week in, week out, month goes by. That will be updated on a regular basis as we hit certain milestones. As far as community relations, I will be the point of contact. So if there's any sort of concern of what are the updates, what is going on, I'll be able to be reached. Obviously, when we get into the technical aspects of the project, individuals on our team are better trained for certain aspects, such as negotiating the purchase and sale or speaking to certain parts of the zoning and technical review. So there'll be specific people assigned to that. But as far as what's going on with the project, can you find me another picture of a front elevation of the building? I'll be the point of contact that will be able to be reached.
Thank you.
I think it's important, on all of our websites, we have questions. So if you have a question about the project, you can type it in and you'll get responded to right away, which is great, because a lot of times things like rumors brought up people not knowing what the answers are. So if someone has a real question about when is this happening, when's that happening, how will this, how are you going to handle this, we can get right back to them. And it essentially is almost an instant response, and it's been really effective for us in partnering with communities and making win-win situations for communities, because they're part of the process, which is what we're all about, making them part of the process.
Thank you. Donna?
Yeah, comment and a question. So I'm familiar with O'Connell Development. President indicated they've worked at WPI. They've done several projects there, been great partners with us. 50 Prescott actually is a building that they developed and we lease part of it, but the other tenants include tech companies that want to do business with WPI. So it's been a very successful model. And then Ty and Bond is from my hometown of West Springfield. They've been in existence for a number of years. And same thing, have a great reputation. My question is the traffic, what the traffic flow and what you've assessed. It's pretty dense when the train arrives, obviously, in the evenings. And I'm just wondering what information you can share right now with that.
I guess I can start a little bit of that, and then John will take over for a little more detail. So one of the exciting parts about when the team did the initial review of the site is we said, how can we work with the topography of the site and find a way of making this a little more efficient? So by aligning the roads with Centennial, the crossroad that comes through, we're able to create an opportunity for further discussion with the town. Obviously, we're going to hire a third-party group to do a traffic study on the property, and then we're going to have to work with the town to figure out a solution for that. But by aligning the roads, you have the option for so many solutions to engineer into this. But one of the value adds to this is we're hoping some of the traffic that's going to the commuter rail station, we're going to be able to pick them up as potential tenants or residents in our community. As I had mentioned earlier, I'm from Shrewsbury. We've lived in some of the different nice apartment projects like the Quinn 35. And I remember when I was living there, there were several people that I'd met that were commuting from there to the Grafton T to get on the train. This is a great opportunity for us to stop that traffic, reallot them to this building, and then be able to walk to the train station. There's also the option of you have now 2 parking areas for the MBTA. There'll be a level of parking that John had mentioned on the lower level for MBTA visitors. And so you're dividing it up amongst 2 different entrances. It seems that the problem for that parking lot is it's a tight turn into the parking lot, and you can only move so many people through that. So now you have the opportunity to move people. I know it's close, but 2 different entrances to parking areas. I don't know if John, if you have anything to add as well.
And it's 2 different entrances on 2 different sides of the street. So people coming over the bridge might prefer to go up to our parking garage because we're on the right-hand side and make a right-hand turn into our garage. People coming down the hill would probably go into the MBTA parking lot. And so instead of crossing over, you now have the ability to go one direction and the other direction to find parking, which is nice. But the real magic in this is why you build transit-based housing in the first place, which is to take people off the road. All the people in our housing project, all people in those 306 units, don't have to move their car in the morning. They can just get up, walk the sidewalk down to the MBTA and get on the train. And hopefully a number of those guys that are parking right now, especially if they're tenants, if they're renters, will find this to be a real attraction, is to not waste time getting back in their car and driving home, but to just get off the train, grab a cup of coffee or a dinner, and then go to the house, go to your apartment, and enjoy life. And I think it's it's something that we're seeing as a trend. People do not like to, and especially the generation we're seeing, does not like to get in their car. In fact, Uber, you can see that Uber and things like that have risen to new heights. In fact, in a lot of places, they're finding that parking lots are empty in these transit-based communities because they don't use cars. They basically use Uber and they use the transit. So hopefully they answered your question.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Peter?
Thank you. So a project that I was very well aware of that is very similar to this one was you guys are familiar with the Bay State Common project that was in Westboro, right? And it redeveloped very similar land. It was sold part of the similar process, but I know it wasn't directly related to transit. But one of the things that I want to know is, outside of it, one being a transit development, one kind of not, but very similar make and style with public spaces available, and then the retail and then the residential. Can you share with me how do you differentiate between the two projects? Because the reason why I bring that up is that project took a long time for tenants to go in there. And a matter of fact, there's still quite a bit of vacancy. And I know it's a ton more retail space than here. But more importantly was the apartment situation as well. And could you kind of might help the community here to kind of maybe know what's really differentiating this project from that one?
Sure. So I think you brought up one of the main points of that project. Timing. When the former manufacturing facility was torn down and this was built, was just not the best timing with the market. It went through some really difficult times. And if you don't land those initial retail tenants when you're predominantly a retail tenant development, that has issues for you down the road. This project, and I got to really hand it to the town of Grafton when they drafted the North Grafton Transit-Oriented Village. What the plan was with this, you allowed the project to favor towards the residential side while still incorporating a commercial component. The days of an apartment project or a multifamily project that have no commercial, I think are going to be dwindling. I think that people want amenities, and but what we're finding is the retail segment is not the big box retailers. So if you look at the Bay State project, I own a property right down the street from that, 69 Milk Street in Westboro, the Westboro Mill. So it's an office building, and we've had great success in finding local tenants, people that live in the area that want to stay in the area for office. But if you look at Bay State Village, Bay State Commons, that is very large blocks of retail. And we're not looking for those type of tenants. The 12,000 or so square feet of retail space that we do have doesn't have to be retail in the normal sense of it. And we're not trying to go after those type of tenants. We're trying to go after people that service the community immediately or the MBTA. That project is a little bit different. This one, you can see the MBTA stop, you can walk right across the street and be there, and that has a value to it. That's something that's very different. People don't want to walk longer distances. They don't have a desire for big box retailers the way that they used to. And so those are some of the factors that really help us with this project. It really being able to shape this as a village, but focus on the living aspect of it and have the retail as a supporting element is very different than a retail project that just has some apartments that were put into it. it's a very different thing. And we think that's a big reason why we're going to be successful is the direct line of sight access to the MBTA, the smaller segment of retail, being selective with what those tenants are early on, make sure we work with the community to get the right tenants, and being favored towards a residential project.
And I think there's one more thing, Casey. We have better parking and more parking than anyone has in any urban instance. And you have a parking lot right there. I mean, that's what every retailer dreams about, because one thing you don't want is for someone to come and try and buy something and not find space. And so that parking lot has in it, was 180 spaces, which is more than any retailer could dream of in 12,000 square feet. But we've dedicated, I believe, somewhere around 60 to 80 of those spaces to 12,000 square feet of retail, which I think is roughly 5 per thousand or 6 per thousand, which is a pretty great retail ratio. And I think you're going to find that retailers love having parking. They also love having their name on the street and signage on the street so people know that they're in there. And so we have both those factors. And, you know, we have the metro on the one side, we have 306 households on the other side. So it's a pretty strong case for them. And you have the whole community around there, including Tufts and all the technology companies that are there that have no services. In fact, I think there's going to be 300 new people coming in there from the from what, UPS? Is that going in? So, I mean, if you're a retailer, especially if you're serving food, having 300 people in a package handling facility, I think right at your doorstep is a pretty good possibility that you're going to be full during lunch and maybe dinner too. Thanks.
Peter, do you have a follow-up?
I did, but his question, his response was pretty good. Oh, going back to what Ms. Stefazio had mentioned before about getting community engagement, for something for us to consider maybe, and I know this is down the road when we decide to do this, but potentially send us some sample charge language for the board to review, just so we can kind of see some ideas about, what defines that type of outreach committee for us to consider.
Great. I had a quick question. During the initial presentation that when I met you guys the first time, you talked a little bit more about Job Corps and how to secure the site and how it might work during construction. They are a neighbor that we want to make sure, that we're aware that we treat them well and we don't want to cause a bunch of problems for them. So I was just hoping you could just mention your plans around Job Corps real quick.
That plan is going to be developing, but I think what we found right away is Job Corps has been nothing but helpful in both touring the site, communicating some concerns they had while we were doing walkthroughs. They're our neighbor, they're going to be a partner with this, but as I alluded to earlier, there is a need for us to develop the site in a certain manner that allows them to still operate, still access the site, but also create security. So that goes back to, John led the design for having that center road that cuts through to service to Job Corps. That allows us to gate both sides of that property, provide a common access to Job Corps, but provide site security. We are hoping to have many conversations with them through the start of this process about how to properly secure the site. Western Builders, they did a project in Amherst, or they're still working a project in Amherst, and providing site security in a college town next to a retirement community was something that was very important. They've done an excellent job of that. So there's no easy map to that other than to communicate with them what's worked in the past, and as trying to secure that site from people coming into it. And what they need as far as access, because when you're tearing up a road or providing a new street access, there's going to be a lot of elements that need to be communicated with them to not shut off their deliveries.
Thank you. Ed?
Yeah, you mentioned an initial presentation. What initial presentation was that?
They interviewed, and Noah also interviewed for this with a group of us. They came and presented when we chose them.
Oh, I must have missed that. Okay.
Yeah, well, yep.
I'm Chair.
Peter?
I just want to let you know there's been a question in the Q&A session that I think would be a good one to read. Thank you.
Yes, I was waiting until all the board members finished their questions before I went to the Q&A. All right, we have one question in the Q&A from Justin Wood, 5 Garden Street. That dog park, it is only for residents of this development or intended for all of Grafton to enjoy? Is it going to be privately maintained?
So I initially, all the projects are going to be managed by a professional management firm, and it's going to be maintained as part of the core property. That won't be an issue at all. As far as access, it depends on timing and depends on the condition of the pandemic. I mean, the health and safety of the residents is of utmost importance. So maybe when this project's completed, we're hoping we're clearing past all of this and we can provide a common area for access to the community. Like we said from the start, community involvement is really what we're looking for. So if we can provide safe access for the community as a dog park, that'd be a great amenity that we can add. But it's all dependent upon how things go in the marketplace.
Great. Doreen.
I just want to know, Casey, you just mentioned something about COVID and the impact. I just want to know what is your success rate with meeting your timelines and or your timeline goals, and do you think that COVID will have an impact on that in any way?
I'll actually turn that over to Matt to discuss a little bit further.
Sure. So from a constructability standpoint, company-wide on both our union side, Daniel O'Connell Sons, and then also our open shop, Western Builders, we've incorporated best practices and all the health guidelines have been issued by the state. So it's been, a learning process and a learning curve, but it's been a successful one. And we have not seen any disruption to our construction schedule based on COVID, and we don't anticipate having that type of issue in this location. We have had the benefit of a couple months now where we've been able to, maybe test through some of those rough patches. So to the extent that COVID would still have kind of a remnant to this project, we don't see any lingering effect to delay or to stretch the timeline in any way.
And I would add that the project that John highlighted, the Hudson project that we're doing jointly with O'Connell, is one of those that's been under construction, and it will be finalized in the next month or two. And we've not had any problems. It has proceeded as planned.
Thank you. John Allen, do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question. I just simply have a comment. In general, based on talking to people and observations, the only construction projects that have been delayed because of COVID have been when the building inspectors weren't available to go out to do the inspections. With the exception of the city of Boston, construction companies have been declared an essential business.
Jen, can I ask one question?
Sure.
With the Hudson project, what was the value? I think you covered it for the 92-bed facility there, but what was the value? John, you're muted, pal.
The overall project cost $65 million, including soft costs. The construction cost is somewhere around $45 million. So it's a big project.
I know you've rezoned that section, and I forget what was there before, but what drove you to do a facility like that at that location? High traffic, a lot of concrete, off of 495 and 290. So what was it?
As interesting as it may seem, seniors don't like to be buried behind trees. They want to be where the action is. And they want to sit on their front porch and see people driving by and have conversations about people who stop into Starbucks. And actually, our real program is so that the kids of the seniors who shop right across the street at the shopping center, when they're done shopping, they stop by and see their mom or their dad. And it becomes part of your life. Instead of going somewhere, out of town to see your parents, they're right there in town, and they're actually right next to your shopping center. And it's very easy for you during part of your life, doing shopping or doing some retailing, to go by and visit and then spend, an hour or so. That's one of the most important things to seniors, seeing their kids and also feeling that they're still engaged in life. And that's why that site's so terrific. I mean, it really is caught up in activity, and it's close to the 99. So, I mean, they can go over there for a cocktail if they want to.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? All right. Thank you all for coming out. It was a great presentation, and thank you for answering all our questions. I know that the purchase and sale agreement is not quite ready, but we do have another motion tonight. Peter, did you receive that via email? Yes.
Yes, I did, Madam Chair.
Yes.
All right, Madam Chair, I'd like to move the board vote to award 8 Pine Street to GSX Ventures based on the proposal submitted on April 2nd, 2020.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Mr. Peter.
Thank you. With respect to that, we don't have the final purchase sale, are we going to be making another motion at some point in time?
Yes, I expect to, hopefully, my expectations are not realistic sometimes, but I'd like to see on the 16th meeting, if we can work it out, to execute or vote for the chair, or if we can accommodate in the document for the entire board to sign the purchase and sale agreement on the 16th and or 23rd, provided those details can be worked out.
Follow up, Madam Chair. So, Tim, just as a matter of procedure, and I'm not saying that this would happen, but if we vote and approve this tonight, okay, which by the way, I'm in support of, but in next week, something is really far off on the PNS, are we bound to still award this contract or award 8 Pine Street if something were to be, I don't know, completely different on the PNS? I'm just asking because I kind of feel like.
Yeah, I'll try to help you with that. It is subject, the PNS will be subject to town meeting approval if we do it prior to town meeting.
Okay.
Town meeting has to approve the disposition of the land. So voting to award, in my mind, just like any other bidding scenario, we always have a vote to award. So the applicant, the proposer knows that we want to go forward with this project consistent with the zone change we did and the master plan that we did for this parcel. So we clear signal to them and to the community, we're moving forward. And now there's a purchase and sale. So no, if we couldn't come to agreement on the purchase and sale and the terms, the document we created lays out what has to be in there. So the applicant's going to have to make sure that everything's complied with. They have earnest money, they had a deposit they gave. So if we're way off in a week or two or can't get it done, just because you vote tonight to award does not obligate you to anything. And obviously we would tell town meeting the same. If we were nervous about it prior to the 20th, we would have a repositioning, if you will.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that explanation. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, all in favor by roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Stock eye.
Fazio, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Thomas, aye. The motion has carried. Thank you all for coming in. I look forward to working with you some more, hopefully a lot. So we will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to meeting all you in person.
Congratulations.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
all right.
Yeah, if I can just add, relative to the master plan and the zone change, have this kind of go through those steps to make us successful. This is just an amazing milestone to be here to award this. So, people should take a deep collective breath in the fact that we've set some goals, we've gone to town meeting, we've made requests to get the property, to change the zone, to develop a master plan, and now to award it. It's I've been here the whole time, so it's the forest from the trees, but people looking from the outside can look at those iterative steps that we've done and be proud of the action of the board and even overall the staff who put together the RFP, who sat through the interviews. I want to thank them and thank the boards and committees. Planning board was instrumental in changing the zone up there. Joe Layden was instrumental. And now the execution rests with, Chris and myself and all other boards and committees to get this thing to completion and built. And it does sound like it's a long way away, but 2023 will come up with before we know it. So it's good that we're taking all these steps now. And just looking back, we took all those steps to get us here, knowing we would have to spend some time going forward to get this built. But this is going to be a great project. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, next, thank you all for coming. You're
Thank
welcome to
you.
stay for the rest of our meeting, or you can,
That's right.
or you can
We'd
zoom
like
out.
to thank the town of Grafton for all the coordination, working with all of y'all. Tim, thank you. And the team's been great. So we're really looking forward. John Allen. So we're looking forward to meeting all of you and working even more closely with you. Y'all have a good evening.
You too. Right, next item on the agenda, we have a resignation, Mary Campbell from the Affordable Housing Trust.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I move the board vote to accept the resignation of Mary Campbell from the Affordable Housing Trust effective immediately and send her a letter of thanks for her years of service to the town.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just briefly, I want to thank Mary Campbell for her time on the Affordable Housing Trust. Mary's not only a good advocate for affordable housing, but she's a good lawyer too. And she was valuable to have there. Her presence will be missed. I do know that there were 2 submissions for membership on the Affordable Housing Trust that were sent in a couple weeks ago. I don't see them on the agenda, so I'm not sure what the status is there. Does anybody know?
Tim, did you want to cover it? You want me to cover?
I don't think a couple weeks. Right now we have 3 openings because we have this one. You had one that was standing, and then I think we had one email to us today. As for the one from earlier this week,
I think my understanding is that because there are multiple openings, I know Joanne was going to talk to Dan Cross and check. So it'll be on the agenda next week, I would imagine. Dan had somebody that was interested. So he had been talking to somebody. So we knew we had multiple openings. So we're just.
that's right. Someone attended the meeting, right? Someone attended.
Yeah, somebody attended the meeting. Yeah.
We should probably streamline this process at some point because last week we had a discussion about an opening that opened and closed really quickly. And now this one's been hanging out, even though a couple people have applied a couple weeks ago. So I would hope to see those on the agenda for the next meeting.
Right.
I'll make a note of that because I don't remember when they were submitted. I thought there was only one, too.
Yeah, I thought there was only one as
Either way,
well.
I'll find them and get them on the field.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor by roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Fazio, aye.
Okay.
Frisbee, aye.
Thomas, aye. A motion has carried. Next, we have new business, vote to adopt the 1/12 budget. Tim?
Yeah, I made notes in the wrong section. Okay. The Department of Revenue gave guidance back in late May for communities that cannot hold town meeting before June 30. So we are going to have town meeting, but we are dependent on weather and who knows what else might hit us. So I'm trying to hedge against, if we don't have town meeting, the DOR says, get your 1/12 budget voted on and submitted to us so we can get it loaded into the system and get it approved by the Director of Accounts at DLS so we can operate seamlessly moving into a new fiscal year. I fully expect we'll have town meeting, but in the event that we don't, this will allow us to basically deficit spend in a fiscal year, in a new fiscal year if we were not to have town meeting. The budgets we would look for you to adopt and bless tonight will be null and void once you have town meeting. These budgets, they will show you that we're in the packet, were based on FY20 approved. numbers at town meeting in May in 2019, or May 2019. So the DOR requires in their guidance a development of monthly expenditure plan with estimates for operations for the general fund and the enterprise fund, including sufficient money for pension liability obligations, the school district, and debt service payments. So we've included that in there. Subject to the board's approval and then the director of accounts at the Department of Revenue. We have 3 budgets for you to consider. One is the town general fund budget, one is the school general fund budget, and one is the town sewer enterprise fund budget. So basically we took the budget table that the town meeting reads and we divided those numbers by 12 on this budget document, which I'll share my screen with you now. I'll do the easiest one first, which is the sewer enterprise fund. So you can kind of ease into this. Let me just make sure I can get that particular one up. Now I need to share the screen. And I think it's this one. Oh, I got the wrong one. All right. Not like we're gonna make it any easier on myself. Give me 1 second.
No, it's up, it's up.
Yeah, no, this is, I have 112. This is the entire budget. School department. Enterprise fund. Okay, so the sewer enterprise fund basically is the total personnel expenses, the total amount for FY20. We extract that out, divide it by 12. We do have some debt service fees that are asterisked here. So this total is what you'd be voting on for the sewer department budget. So this one lays out easier than any other one. There is a more difficult process that the accountant has to do relative to uploading this information into the DOR gateway system for approval. But I thought this was the easiest way to break it out for the board. Again, these are the 20 figures that the town meeting approved, and it's just a 112 budget based on that approval. There are carve-outs in the other 2 budgets, which I'll cover in a minute, but this one was the most straightforward because it's simply divisible by 12. We'll probably spend less than this 122, but there's a lot of chemicals involved with treatment of storage. So that's volatile, but we still think we meet the 122, 168.02 number. The other one is more straightforward. The school department appropriation in May of 2019 for fiscal 20 was 36,582,272. The 112 is 3,048,523. So that would be the second budget piece, and this is also what we would submit as required. This is more complicated as it's the entire operating budget. There are some discounts to prepay items. So let me go to the top. Sorry to be bouncing around here. So if you look at the budget table that we go through a town meeting, we have the moderator, selectman, town administrator, FinCom. We have 20 personnel, 20 expenses, FY20 total, 21 personnel, 21 expenses, all divisible by the 112. So that's what this column will subtotal to for FY21, but based on 21 approvals. So I don't want to confuse you, but it is 20 approvals. We can't increase the budget because we can only do 112 based on a previous fiscal year. So the accountant did all the math on all these pieces. The only thing that's we added in here from the original document is BVT, because that's a non-appropriated amount under the budget. We read it separately, but we will have to make our quarterly contributions to BVT, which will total $215,624. And then prepayment for Worcester County retirement, if we pay for July 1, we have a savings for early payment of $38,706, which we've always done. We have the cash flow on hand to do that, and we want to take advantage of that savings. And that's what that asterisk deals with. And then sewer principal payment, we have indirect costs that come back from the enterprise fund to offset the general fund costs to make sewer principal payments. So that's why that's there as well. So we're going to pay for that out of the general fund, but the money comes from sewer user fees that gets transferred in as an indirect cost. So you will need $4,733,564 for July 1 to July 31st of the first month of the fiscal. So I think we rewrote a motion earlier today based on these three scenarios. So if you have questions, I'll do my best to answer them, but that's really the long and short of it.
Yeah, Ed?
Okay, so obviously the way that expenses actually work with the budget, not all expenses are even for each and every single month. So how are we dealing with, or I guess how would we deal with in a hypothetical situation where it was 1/12 budgets for 12 months a year, in months that we were a little bit shorter, and then I assume that that money carries over to the next month for availability, correct?
Yeah, you'll have to vote on a monthly basis. You'll have to do this again, God forbid, if we have to do this again mid-July, if we didn't have town meeting on the 20th, you would do it again and we could reassess the costs. I mean, obviously our personnel costs are kind of always the same, but expenses can change. Fuel costs can go up. Electricity rates are pretty stable, but they could be one-time expenses like debt service that we would want to, depending on when they're made, we'll have to increase those numbers accordingly and submit for approval to DOR. So yeah, so they would carry over. You would basically vote on another number, never exceeding the 1/12 amount from that month.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Any further questions from the board? Okay, there are a couple. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
No, Madam Chair, you got it. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Actually, the first one is more of a statement. The second one is a question from Greg Marr about the guidance was at least 1/12 of the budget as of July 1st, 2019. I'm not sure what that question is. I thought the guidance was at least 1/12 of the budget as of July 1st, 2019.
Yeah, well, we vote in May for a July budget. So July 1, 2019 starts fiscal year 20. So we're only appropriating 1/12 of fiscal year 20's budget to each line item under this proposal.
Okay. Oh, at least instead of exactly is what his question was. He came back in. All right.
Okay.
Peter?
Yeah, thank you. Real quick, Tim, did you say that there was some things that we get some discounts for, or we get savings, I should say, if we pay in July? And are any of, like, are those, can you kind of elaborate a little bit on what those are, just for my own benefit?
Payments we have to pay out for July 1?
One of the commentary that you mentioned when you did the brief presentation was that there were certain things that we pay out in July that we kind of pre-buy for the whole year. Can you elaborate on some of those, like, prepaid contracts?
Yeah, Worcester County Retirement is one, and they were not, they do their actuarial study in terms of having money in and earning interest every month. They didn't really see a need to forgive the July 1 deadline and give us that savings. So that $38,000 savings will happen when we make that payment as of July 1. So we'll have that ability to do that. Either way, under this scenario, because we asterisked it to the Department of Revenue for approval, and if we have town meeting, we've always wanted to make that. The other piece is town insurance for our general liability, for all the assets we have, all the buildings, all the vehicles, workers' comp. We pay all that up front and we get a 5% discount for doing that. They have allowed us more flexibility in terms of paying them, I think up until August, the end of August, to pay that full $567,000. So because we have the flexibility of I wouldn't want to pay them all up front because we can earn interest on that money now instead of paying them, and I'll still save that 5%. So those are the only two that are really to incentivize us to pay as of July 1. It's Worcester County Retirement and town insurance to Maya.
Thank you. Madam Chair?
Question?
I move the board vote to approve the monthly expenditure plan for July 2020 as follows. For the general fund, $4,733,564. For the school department, $3,048,523. And the sewer department fund, $122,168.02. And authorize the electronic submission of the plan in accordance with the Division of Local Services Bulletin 2020-6.
Second. Jen might be frozen.
Yeah, I'm gonna take over until she is able to log out and jump back on. So any discussion from the board? Ed?
Just briefly, I understand why we would want to do this in probably, I guess, a last case scenario or a worst case scenario. But just to make note, we're basing what should be an FY21 budget off of numbers that we came up with in 2019. So obviously, this was a year coming up that we felt like there would be perhaps significant shortfalls in revenue to be able to pay for our expenses. And now we're going into FY21 based on last year's numbers. So, we talk about sustainability a lot. Like, this is definitely not something that you would want to do for 12 months in a row. So ought to be considered our last case option or our worst case scenario, break glass in case of emergency type of event. But here we are, and we don't know what's going to happen. So this is why we have to do what we have to do. And I think this is, the only thing we can do really right now.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor by roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Walk aye.
Frisbee, aye.
DeFazio, aye. Without Jen here, I will declare the motion carried.
You're muted, Doreen. You're muted.
I keep getting muted for some reason. There we go. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Okay, so moving on to the next new business, vote to waive the ANR fee for 93 North Street. Tim, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, basically this family's donating this land to us, but they need to go through a process to remove the farmhouse that's on the parcel. So I'm not sure who actually made the request. I think it was more of a, hey, we should do this since we're getting 8 acres of land from these folks. So only the board can vote to waive that fee. So that's what we're asking you to do.
Great. Peter?
Yeah, thank you. Tim, could you just kind of explain what A&R means? It's one of those things where, I'm an acronym cop. So when I see something like that with no definition, I meant to email you yesterday to see if you could, be prepared for it. I apologize. That's on me. But for the general purpose, can you tell us what A&R is?
Yeah, I know. It's a good question because I go back and forth with it all the time. Approval not required is what it stands for. So there's they submit telling the planning board or whomever that there is not an approval required, and then they either agree or disagree with that assertion that there is an approval not required. So to file that, there's a filing fee under the bylaw, which you get to waive if you so choose. So approval not required is the short answer.
All right, thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Peter?
Madam Chair, I move the board vote to waive the approval not required fee for 93 North Street.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor by roll call?
Carlson,
Frisbee,
aye.
Stock aye.
Fazio, aye. Motion has carried. Bear with me while I toggle down the agenda here. Oh, we might be getting Jen back too. Here we are. Hi, Jen, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Great. So we are now at item 7A, discussion revitalization of recycling green community.
You've already done select board reports and everything?
Nope. I may have skipped over that. My apologies.
Okay, we can go back after we finish the green communities.
I'm toggling underneath my Zoom screen, so I may have gone by it. My apologies to everybody. Do we want to go back in order, or it's up to you, Madam Chair? Do you want to go back in order, or do you want to continue with the agenda item I was going to start?
If you've already started it, I think you should keep going.
I haven't started it yet. We just voted on North Street, 96 North Street.
Okay, why don't we go to select board reports then? Does any member of the board have a report? Doreen?
Yeah, I just want to update the board that EDC had a meeting last night, and we do have a balance in our budget, and what was determined is we can divide that funding between different small businesses and use them as incentives to the community for gift cards to go and patron these places. The logistics of this have not been discussed. John Allen is working on that, but I think it's an incredibly good idea to encourage people to shop local and remind them, you know, what places are opening in town, and you know, with the incentive of giving them gift certificates. So like I said, I'll update the board when there's more detail on how we're going to do that and the timeline of when we're going to do that, hopefully sooner rather than later. But it was a productive meeting. We also discussed 8 Pine Street, which obviously we went over tonight, so I don't need to fill anyone in on that.
Thank you. Anybody else have a report? Okay, I have a couple of things. First, this CPC is continuing to have the forums. Tomorrow night is the one for historic preservation. You can get the Zoom link on the town's website. The Affordable Housing Trust did meet. We're continuing to work towards the rental assistance program. There are several openings, so we believe there's going to be 3. So if people are interested, please apply. And then one last thing I need to ask the board. We did receive a request from Ed Prisby and the law firm of K.J. Weissman and Colasanti for meeting minutes from 2014 and 2020. So I just need to ask the board about their availability to meet next week to review and approve these meeting minutes so that we can release them to Ed. So would you like executive session before the meeting in a separate meeting, or would you like, or after, or is the board available?
Whenever.
I would do before the meeting. Oh, sorry.
Peter?
I'm sure. So before the meeting, is that like our 6:45, like we typically had done when we were going through minutes before?
I think we would need a little bit more time, so I think it would be 6:30.
Okay.
Because there's quite a bit of the minutes, but it would be the way the Zooms have been working. We don't have the capability to start the meeting at 6:30 with just us and then add people. So it would be 2 separate meetings like we had done that other time, instead of, if it's at the end of the meeting, then we're able to just ask everybody to Zoom out. But we can still do it before. It's just going to be 2 separate links like we did the last time. So I just want to find out if it's makes sense to do it at 6:30 or do it at the end of the meeting. But I'm hearing 6:30 from 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right. So 6:30. We will have executive session next week at 6:30. Thank you. Any other select board reports? If not, TA report.
Just briefly, obviously a lot of the stuff we covered already that we've been working on since last week. But generally, we've been working on the mailer that will use direct door marketing material. It's being printed now. We have to get special labels for the United States Postal Service, which has to be broken down into different routes and different post office box. Not to need to know that detail, but we try to hit everybody. We did learn in the last mailing, there were some people that did not get them for some reason. Unfortunately, we don't do it by address. We just do it by every postal customer. So if someone didn't get it, we can't really hold anybody accountable. So we're trying to do our best to get the word out there. The document itself is on the website, not in the true state, but we can put a PDF of it on the website as well. So that's underway. Rebecca and I did a TV program either Thursday or Friday of last week. We did it on Zoom. The quality is not great, but we did just want to provide some baseline information about town meeting that'll be held on the 20th. We hope Ray will do a presentation ahead of us or behind us on that same video link, just to provide insight about how he envisions town meeting working. We are moving forward with the plans that we discussed last week, so I won't rehash those, but we're still on pace to do that. And registration will start at 7:30. So that's good for us to give a little bit more time. We're having some signage made and so forth. So that's the logistics for town meeting, but we try to provide some information on the warrant articles themselves. We did the 112 budget. We are 99% complete on the LED streetlight project. We have 5 nodes on various streetlights. All these streetlights have nodes on top of them that communicate back to a gateway that allow us to see what's the functionality of the light is. So we have 5 out of the 767 that aren't working right now that we will track down and find out why they're not working. It could be a distance issue, it could be a tree issue, could be no power, what have you. So we're working on that as well. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have allowed staff on a staggered basis to come back into the building under a reopening plan. There's a pretty detailed COVID-19 policy document and documents that the members staff who come back into the building have to sign off on in terms of self-certification of their health. And then there's a daily tracking document in Google Docs that allow us for tracing purposes in the event that anybody does get sick, we can comply with the tracing requirement for that. So those are kind of a general idea of what's been happening from last week to this.
Lori?
Yeah, Madam Chair, through you to Tim, just to clarify, as Town Hall begins to reopen, it's reopened to staff only and not the public. Is that correct?
That's correct. Staff only. Our position A is if people can be successful in their departments working from home, they should continue to do that. But people that need to come in here to make their offices successful, that's what they're doing now. We've modified a lot in the building to keep people safe. And if we are to move forward next week or the week after, depending on state guidance and depending on illness, we will open by appointment only for people to make appointments and come in. I have to have someone sitting at the desk at the front door logistically to track people to come in under the COVID policy that's required. So we're not taking temperature of people. We're asking them to self-certify, but it will be by appointment only to begin with. And we'll take baby steps. The other organizations that are separate from us, not separate, but in satellite locations, if you will, the library and COA, we're taking our time with them to reopen as they're have different populations. We want to learn from our mistakes opening up so they don't make those same mistakes. So they'll probably be on a lag of probably 2 to 3 weeks after us, but they'll start with small things relative to transportation and with a limited amount of people on the van. And then the library will start on limited return of books and kind of get their feet wet going through. And they have a separate return to work plan that they're following. And we're lending support to get them up and running. But our model guidance is what everybody's going to use, but they're just on a slower return to work basis for those two groups.
Thank you. Any other questions for Tim? All right, we'll move on to correspondence. Peter, you mentioned you had some.
I have one, yes. From Lydia Bogar, she was, I'm going to read it verbatim because I can't really summarize it. When do our tax dollars stop flowing into the money pit behind the center library. The contaminated soil continues to be a very expensive issue. Where do you draw the line and consider an open green space at this location? That's all I have.
Thank you. Excuse me. Discussion A, revitalization of Grafton Green Committee. Grafton Green Committee. Doreen.
Great, thank you. So a couple things. Back last August, which seems like a lifetime ago, but back last August when we had our goals meeting, one of the things that was brought up was working on more sustainability, meaning environmental work here in town through a committee. And I know that the town has done really well with the Green Communities Program. The example of the LED lights that Tim just mentioned is grant funding that we got from that. But Tim brought up a couple of weeks ago the issue that's going to come up for the board in the coming year of our trash and recycling going up. And you know, this is an opportunity for the board to be proactive, knowing that in this probably worst timing case scenario, that we are going to see an increase in our trash and recycling operation. So what I'm presenting to the board today is a draft of a charge of primarily reestablishing a recycling committee to research options and develop a plan that assists Grafton Select Board in solid waste recycling contract decisions. So, for example, if other communities are doing different options, different types of scenarios with their trash and recycling that maybe Grafton hasn't looked at yet, that can save the town money in one of the largest budget items we have. I think putting together a committee would only help. So, and then part two of that would be when the town administrator, when the board determines how we want to move forward, to have this committee sort of do maybe outreach to the community on what that will be. So it could be an elimination of recycling, it could be a different contractor, it could be a number of things. It could be adding composting to save money, whatever the committee brings to us. So that's really it. Like I said, I think it's an opportunity for us, knowing that this is going to be a larger budget item for us in the coming year. The best thing to do is, come forward with a proactive decision to start addressing it now, instead of waiting until we have a Harvey contract in front of us that we know will be increased based on, the TA telling us so. So, any questions? I was pretty loose with this charge, and me working in sustainability also added a little bit of, promoting climate stabilization and other important environmental goals. Certainly, I think that there would be some enthusiasm around that, but primarily the goal in charge of the committee, first and foremost, would be to work on the reestablishing a solid waste and recycling plan that could not decrease our costs, but increase our costs to the town as little as possible. So is there any questions? I'll answer them. Peter. Sorry, through Jen.
Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I'm totally on board with this. I guess my question about the charge, when you said to analyze and look at, can the committee determine like what the future costs are going to be? I mean, one of the things that we're hearing today is that the recycling that was implemented many years ago, which was a great success for Grafton, has changed a lot. The recipient of a lot of that recyclable material, which went overseas, is no longer receiving it, from what I understand. I mean, is it going to be going as far as looking at that and looking at what are the projections and trends for the next, say, 5 to 10 years in terms of the recycling, I'm not going to say burden, but the recycling liability of these types of waste removal contracts?
Doreen, did you want to respond?
Sure, thank you. Peter, you're spot on. So this is exactly the type of thing that I would like the committee to do is provide data to the board. So with that, will probably come a recommendation or several recommendations of what to do. But what I'm looking for is a committee of people who are willing to do research on what the recycling market looks like. Is it going to get better or not? Right now we have a contract with Wheelabrator, and just to mention, you brought up something too about what we have in place now. I was one of the people on the original committee who established the pay-as-you-throw program and the current recycling contract that we have in place now with Harvey. And that may end up changing completely. So for example, Wheelabrator, we burn our garbage for energy. And so depending on the tipping fee and the tonnage, does that mean that our recycling program completely goes away? Or is there going to be an increased cost if we burn more at Wheelabrator? So this is the type of data that would be really important for the board to have and go into more detail on not just the solid waste side and that contract with Wheelabrator, but specifically of what the recycling market looks like and how it will trend forward. So we can make some good decisions on this budget item that's close to $1 million in our budget.
Thank you. Any other questions for Doreen? Donna?
With regards to the charge that you have, you talk about the committee representation. You say 7 members appointed by the select board to serve a 3-year term. I didn't know whether or not you wanted to put some recommendations on, a member of the select board should be on that. If there's some town representative that should be on that. And then I think you'd want staggered 3-year terms because the way it's presented right now, it's just existing for 3 years. So that would be my recommendation.
Doreen?
Thank you, Donna. I think those are great recommendations. And I purposely left that, and that's why I put this as a draft, because I didn't know if this was something that the board perhaps wanted to do just over a 1-year period and concentrate just on the trash and recycling, if 7 members was too many, if we wanted a select board rep on there. I'd be open to any of those scenarios and change the charge appropriately.
Ed?
Doreen, you've been doing this a long time. I mean, keep it flexible to what you think is best to get an end result. Obviously, the market's shifting here, and none of us have a crystal ball as to where this is going. The situation in China is fluid, could change with the November election, could not. We don't know. I do know, however, that sneaky Peter Carlson has very strong opinions about trash in the town of Grafton, and all you have to do is get him a beer and he'll tell you all about it. He'll go on for hours and hours. So if you're not willing to do it, I'm sure that you can rope Peter into a little bit of the work.
Doreen?
Madam Chair, through you. So Ed, are you suggesting that we do not need a committee and that I should just be talking to Peter about this? Or are you in favor of?
No, don't do that. Don't do that.
Doreen, I just have one quick thing. In town, we tend to get a lot of defunct committees. When they just stop meeting and then, they kind of just hang around. So I don't know if you would consider maybe putting like if the committee doesn't meet in a year or 6 months or whatever it is, but just come up with some sort of kind of switch that the committee automatically becomes defunct if it stops meeting, if it stops serving a purpose, so that we don't have to go in and clean it up, because we have a lot of committees that are on the books but are no longer meeting. Doreen?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And that's a great point, Jen. And that's why, if we want to vote on this tonight with changes, or I can bring it back next week with these revisions. I'm happy to do that as well. It's not something that's going to start before town meeting, so I'm willing to make those changes. But I would like to hear from the board. Should it be a 1-year term or a 3-year term? And what your opinion is on that. Thank you.
Here,
Thank you. So to your question, Doreen, and I'm wondering if 3 years is really required in this case, because if you're going to provide an analysis and report back, and this is going to kind of coincide with some potential major changes in the way we handle waste removal and recycling. Does it make sense to just kind of do that for a 1-year term? Is that enough time, do you think, to gather enough information? And then to Donna's point, that way you don't have to stagger the appointments. You can just meet for the whole year, very much like we did with the fire study committee. We had a very defined charge. We had to come up with a specific outcome, and just to know if you might be amenable to just changing that 3 to 1 year and then just appointing 7 members.
Doreen?
Yeah, Madam Chair, through you, I think that's a great suggestion. And I think I enthusiastically was trying to add 2 different committees into one being, the more important one, which is trying to collect data for the board to make and the town administrator to make the most informed decision on how to move forward with our curbside trash and recycling. And the second one was more environmental impact in the town. So I agree with you, and through this conversation, it's helped me see that a lot. So I think it makes more sense if the board agrees to do a 1-year term, and I can change the draft to specifically be for the trash and recycling contract review.
Donna, did you have your hand up?
Doreen just answered that question.
So I guess then I would prefer if there's some changes to be made, and also the week, if there people have some questions that they want to reach out in the week. So I would prefer to put it back on the agenda next week after the changes are made, and also would give people an opportunity to provide some input if they so choose. So if that's okay, we'll put it back on next week.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, can I just add one thing? Because it might impact the timing, just so we're clear that fiscal 21 through fiscal 21, we have a contract with the LRB, and we have a longer standing duration contract with Wheelabrator. So it's 22, so Doreen's right, the board's right, and it's assumption that to be proactive about it now, you have a year out for when those changes would take effect. I can tell you that we've long enjoyed some savings because the market for recycling has been down for over 2.5 years. And they've, E.L. Harvey's cried to me about that particular facet because we've had a great contract because we haven't had to pay for it. So they've been storing it. I can tell you they gave me a proposal yesterday, and this will be a commodities market driven, but right now the estimate is $90 a ton, and we average about 1,700 tons. So pretty quickly you can see the increase in this budget as a result of that if we continue down the road. So some of the things that this group will grapple with, and then ultimately the board will, obviously we like the curbside pickup for trash. I know a lot of people want weekly recycling, but those numbers are astronomical now. They would be worse if we tried to do it with a commodity-based piece. But just for frame of reference, when I got here in 2000, Doreen's part and parcel of this success, I think, in terms of sustainability for a budget for one line item. 2009, this budget was $916,000. It dropped in 10 as a result of putting in pay-as-you-throw to 726, almost a $200,000 swing, not including the pay-as-you-throw offset from revenue of bags. So in essence, from 9 to 10, with net cost, when you net out the revenue from bags, it turned into a $325,000 cost to the taxpayer, even though they pay for the bags. But the program and that budget reduction of $200K has been maintained. I will tell you, from 10 until 20, 10 years, the budget today for trash pickup, curbside recycling, and burning of waste at Wheelabrator is $788. Yes, it's $50,000 higher, but incrementally over a curve year or 10-year period, that is just an amazing place to be. So we'll share those data points with the committee. And I think the board will be interested to know what those reductions in waste have been in terms of tonnage being burned and those being recycled, which really drove down those costs. That was the whole reason for pay as you throw to begin with. But you can look at this trend and see that it worked. So Doreen, thank you.
Well, thank you, but the ride might be over, so that's why that's why I want to revisit it.
All right. Any other questions about this? I think we have our plan moving forward, so we'll see it back on the agenda next week. Next on the agenda, committee governance policies. Donna.
Just a couple of comments before this. I recognize that there's some typos in here. I think Peter and I are familiar with these policies. They apply to all school committee members, not just in Grafton, but across the state. So I basically took the school committee policies in Grafton, and anywhere it said superintendent, I put in town administrator. Anywhere it said school committee, I put in select board. So the language hasn't changed drastically, but I do know there's some references to the school system, and I think there was some to principals and teachers. So those can be cleaned up. There may be some duplication, I think, in the executive session language, which can be cleaned up. There are things here, the agenda formats. We have a specific agenda in the school committee's policy. They actually put that agenda format directly in their policy. I didn't do that right now. Recess meeting is something that we've never encountered, maybe just because of my short term on the board, but I thought that was an interesting thing. And as I said, it's part of the school committee policy. One thing I think I may have mentioned at the last meeting is having a time limit on these meetings, so that we're not legislating at midnight or 11 o'clock at night. So I didn't specifically add that right now. The school committee doesn't have that. I think the planning board, somebody mentioned the planning board does. So whether it's 3 hours or something like that, and then there'd have to be a vote by the board to say, yes, we want to continue for another 20 minutes to get this done, or carry it over, whatever it may be. So that's that for the majority of these. And then, as I said before, I took the social media policy from the town of Easton and inserted it in here. So just for discussion, if you've got questions, concerns, obviously, I can take them down tonight and hopefully get the information that you need to bring back next week as another agenda item. So.
Any questions? Ed?
So, I'm never going to jump on anybody for taking initiative in the group to come up with something that they feel is important. I don't remember talking about a need for policies. We talked about a need for a handbook, but here are some policies. I went through these in pretty good detail. Different communities do this differently. I know that Easton does have a social media policy. I went through it. I think Easton's in this draft is problematic on a lot of First Amendment levels. But also, apart from that, there are some other things in here where we talk about quorum, talk about executive session, and talk about communications between town employees and the select board that I think need to be vetted further. So I guess I would recommend that this process go through a subcommittee process. I think there should be more than one set of eyes on this. And I recognize the need where, the executive board of a town of 18, 19,000 people, we oversee are responsible for the management of the town administrator and the assistant town administrator. So we need to have some guidelines in place for how we handle certain things. it's come up lately that we don't really operate under Robert's rules for the course of our meetings. You know, when things were, I think, less contentious on the board, it was less of a problem. But now I would like some rules in place about who gets to talk when, frankly. You know, we get information on a weekly basis from the town administrator about COVID, and I'm never sure about, you know, when do I release that? If Tim tells me something that's happening in town, is that information I can pass along? Is it not? When are the times when information comes to us individually that we can pass on to the public? Jen attended meetings with developers I didn't know about. You know, I don't like getting information after or at the same time that the public gets it. So, you know, there are things that we should talk about here. So I guess I would recommend, and I would like to know how everybody else thinks about this, just a subcommittee to hash these things out and then bring them back in final form after vetted by council.
Donna?
Yeah, so through you to Ed, one of the things that you just brought up, one thing that I've noticed here that the superintendent used to do was if one member asked for some information, everybody got it. And I haven't seen that in practice here necessarily. I mean, I think we see it, but we may see the question come up in our BOS email, but it's not always disseminated. So that's something I thought was very, very helpful, is that we all had the preparation in ahead of time rather than hearing about it and then having to get the information. But Madam Chair, I would like to go ahead with whether it's a motion or just a suggestion that we do form a subcommittee. I'd like to be a part of it, and if Ed wants to be a part of it, I think that would be a great idea.
Okay. Any other discussion? Peter?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to form a select board subcommittee to evaluate and report back on select board policies to the board in how much time? I mean, these can kind of take a life of their own, say in 4 months.
That's fine. Second.
Donna?
I don't know if I want to put a time period on it. There may be things that are easily agreed upon and we could bring them to the board, and then there's some things that will need some more. This isn't comprehensive by any means, so that's what I'm saying. I think there's other suggestions that may come up over time that could be incorporated. So as I said, I'm great with a subcommittee, but I just don't want a time limit on it. Maybe we can do it sooner, or maybe we have to take longer.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. That motion included a time.
It included 4 months.
Yeah, Mr. Carlson?
Madam Chair, I'll make a amendment to my original motion if you would accept it. I would remove the time restriction of 4 months and have no time restriction. So my motion would read, I motion that the select board create a subcommittee with 2 members to evaluate and report back on future select board policies.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. There are some questions that I will address now. From Lisa Rice, has the attorney looked at this policy, and will public input be sought before voting? So I do know it was sent to council. Tim can.
Yeah, we had notes. Mark we sent it for two things. One was just general legal counsel from Kramer. She had notes and I had some notes and modified it. And then Mark opined on a couple pieces, didn't have enough time to go through it. It was like last week that we tabled it. I told him to stand down from his review until we had this discussion. I never doubled back with him after that. So short answer is yes, they both have it. And we have some comments, some of them have been addressed tonight, but there's probably some more to go through the subcommittee.
Thank you. I have another couple things here. Justin Wood, may I suggest that if this policy should affect more than affects other boards and elected bodies, that you allow other board members, not just select board, to be part, excuse me, part of the committee. And Lisa wants to know, what about public input? Any response to those questions? I would imagine the public input will come if it's a subcommittee. It will be a public meeting. The public will be able to attend and provide input. Any other comments, questions? No? Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, by roll call.
Carlson, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Fazio, aye.
Thomas, aye. The motion is carried. Peter?
Madam Chair, I would like to appoint Donna Stock and Ed Prisby to the Select Board, Subcommittee for Select Board Policy.
Second.
Okay, that's great. We think 2 members is the correct number of members.
That works.
Otherwise, it's a quorum.
That's true. Well, I still would like you to post your meetings so that people can know what you're discussing. All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing
Opposites
none.
attract. Here we go. Let's do it.
Any, by roll call.
Carlson, aye.
Fazio, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Thomas, aye. All right, thank you. All right. Pardon me, fiscal year 21 budget. Tim? Tim?
Yeah, sorry about that. I know that the members know that I attended the Finance Committee on Wednesday last week and again on Saturday morning to discuss a strategy for not using stabilization or free cash to balance fiscal 21. So we had a lengthy discussion on Wednesday. It kind of went full circle back to pay increases and hiring freezes, freezing pay increases and freezing hiring for the town and for the schools. So I think that's ultimately where they landed and wanted Jay and I to work together on getting down that 190 we were proposing to use. You'll remember last week we had a proposal where we had reductions because the library timing and when that would open, we had an automatic reduction of using that 190. So we've been working from Saturday to today, looking for 135, and we are close to doing that. We want to put together just a memo to the board and to the finance committee on what the reductions were to get this balance without using stabilization. I will just remind the board of the policy the finance committee and the select board adopted some time ago. And maybe that's one of the ones that need to be reviewed, but it does talk about revenues and reserves and what they should be used for. That's why I promoted their use in this particular instance. You do have 3.6 million and just in stabilization, and then you have other reserves that you have availability for. So we made those adjustments. The Nelson Park and Trust, that is a trust that former town administrator Dan Morgado used to use quite a bit, from what I understand, to offset their operating expenses. Right now that's covered by the general fund. We've done this one other time in the past. We did restore their funding, but that would be a $25,000 reduction, and we look to use their trust fund money for that purpose. So that'll get us to 25 of the 135. And then the rest will be, obviously we've already made reductions in getting no staff and no hiring. The rest of that 114, 140 will be within the school district to find. So Jay's on board with that concept, either using school choice or making reductions to the fiscal 21 budget. So we'll prepare a memo with those adjustments. There's been a lot of iterations from the revenue we had pre-COVID, the revenue reduction, all of the steps we took to balance the budget, including using stabilization to shore up the budget, to the meeting on Wednesday and then on Saturday to get us to where we are now. So we are balanced. I think we'll have at least a unified message getting to town meeting. The thing I would urge the board to do is relative to Article 6, the contingent budget. When we reviewed them and we printed them and shared them with the board last week, Finance Committee on Saturday morning had a different take on what that contingent budget should be. So there needs to be some reconciliation on what the board wants and what Finance Committee wants. So maybe at our meeting the logistics meeting we have on Thursday before Saturday, we can hash those things out. But I am trying to go through their contingent versus ours. Ours, when we shared it with you, was like 800 and change, 800,000. Theirs is about 920, 930, just under $1 million. So just small modifications that we just need to reconcile with the Finance Committee.
Doreen?
Yeah, Madam Chair, through you, do we have a copy of the of FinCom's budget, contingency budget?
Nah, I don't know. They sent it to me today or yesterday. But I can send that along. Sue sent that to me earlier today. But what I was going to do was reconcile between ours and theirs and put together one memo that showed the differences so you could follow along. 'Cause there's, 11 or 12 line items with different numbers in them. But I can send that along cold.
Doreen?
Yeah, Madam Chair, through you, that would be great. The sooner you can share that information with the board, so we know what questions we want to ask them for the meeting on Thursday before town meeting. That would be great. I had a second question and I forgot it. So.
Ed?
Yeah, so I was trying to follow along and I was in the car for Thursday and then actually Wednesday, Thursday, and then Saturday. And I know there was a lot of back and forth. So there was what was the delta that you guys were trying to bridge? About $1.39 without using free cash or stabilization?
Yeah, I think it came down to that. There was a number thrown out about what Jay was saving. When we had his budget from December, this is where it gets confusing. So if you want to get into the weeds, we had a presentation to you 3 weeks ago about savings for non-union at zero and not having an EDC coordinator any longer, and that savings was $129,506. So we had a big delta at that time. And based on the December budget from the school, we took an extraction out of their line items. And so their budget was old. So there were things that they were already cut, I guess, and we were cutting them as well, but they had already made those reductions. So, things they were carrying to total 170 was everything from superintendent, assistant superintendent, executive assistant, finance director, bookkeepers, HR director, curriculum director, special ed director, special ed secretary, special ed coordinators. There were a ton. And they were all various raises from 2%. And then one of them, there was a reduction of $3,300. So there must have just been an accounting issue with that increase. So a total of 170, but that was not the number at the end of the day that we could actually take advantage of to balance the budget.
Okay, so where does things stand right now?
Right now, I think we were looking for 139, and between our reductions and the school department's further reductions, I think it was 104 is what we were trying to come up with. 134, excuse me. So now the school, after our reductions of the 129, which went in various stages to get that reduction, there's 114, 104 that the school is looking to reduce and or use school choice, or I'm sorry, circuit breaker and or school choice.
Okay. So we've got, it's now the 9th. We've got town meeting on the 20th. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we haven't taken a vote on our budget yet, have we?
Well, in a way you did at the last meeting relative to motions that were made for reductions.
Well, I remember the contingent budget, but I don't remember the actual FY '21 budget as it stands minus the override.
Yeah, I've actually, I don't think we've ever voted on a budget.
Okay. Because I mean, at this point, we're 11 days out, and I'd be hard pressed to tell you what's in the FY '21 budget. When is this going to be resolved with Finance Committee?
Well, I think in terms of the marching order for what we had to find, I think they were off a little bit in that number. It's really between Jay and I to figure that out between today and Friday. But in terms of the operational piece, there's not a lot. Jay's waiting a number from me, but I'm waiting a number from him because they don't have an adopted budget with the school committee. They have a preliminary one that they did in December, but they have a new one, but they want to base that on the number that we can provide them on a levy. So I did that today. Now it's just for him to say, yeah, we can make this work with 1.4 million versus 1.5 million.
Maureen, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Jen, through you to Tim. So just for some clarification, so Jay is making a 114 adjustment right now, and you don't know the details of that, and that's the next step. That's what we're waiting for.
Yes, he intimated in a text it was either going to be through technology or to use circuit breaker. School choice, there's a significant allocation of money in school choice that he could use too, but I don't know what his plans are for that in the overall entire budget. So I can't recommend he use that because I don't know if he already has it programmed in.
Maureen?
And just a follow up to that. So then that will go back to FinCom to discuss and vote on. I just want a little more clarification on the process.
Yeah, I mean, they took a different approach with this budget than I've ever seen, which is fine. I mean, I know they're concerned about using one-time revenues, but we're in a very, very bad spot. So I was following the policy that's adopted. They charged us with trying to find a way to not use one-time revenues, which is good. But I will tell you, when we started this whole thing about having parity between town and the school about pay increases, that's where we kind of went off the rails in terms of growth and wages. But we've come full circle back to that first position that if we can have parity and have no increases and no new staff, it signals that we are living within our means and we're willing to take that hit, at least for non-union people. So we have that willingness on both sides now, and that's what got us closer to being balanced and not having to use stabilization to balance the budget.
Doreen?
Yeah, one more quick clarification, and thank you for this. So we have 3.6 in stabilization, and then we have other reserves as well, such as the road stabilization fund, correct? So there's other monies down the road that the board can vote on if necessary.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of liquidity to get us through a very difficult time. So we're worried about state aid, but we just don't know. And if we overreact to what we think the cuts might be, we would be eliminating, if a 10% cut in state aid is $1.2 million. You have to eliminate things. So yeah, you have 3.6, you have free cash 1.8. You do have a capital plan that uses some of that money, but maybe, and this is a decision to be made by bodies and the legislative body to decide, do we forego 1 year of capital? I know we're kicking the can down the road, but we need to fix the roof before we sweep the floor, so to speak. So if we want to get through, we have those two levers in which to pull. The further safety net, if you will, is the use of the road stabilization account. With the vote of town meeting, you can vote with a 2/3 majority to repurpose those funds for 1 year, 2 years, whatever you decide. Of course, the road program that we voted on, it went to ballot. We've been committed to it. We want to continue it. But again, if you can't adequately fund operations, you do have the opportunity to make that request to town meeting, and town meeting has the ultimate authority to vote it up or down. So we're thinking in the back of our minds about the override, pass or fail, and then what happens with state aid if it's significantly reduced. In that scenario, pass or fail, do you pull those levers just to get you through 1 year? And people have to, when I did this on the program we did and shared it with the finance committee, you have to look back to 2008 and 2009, where we had a $691,000 state aid reduction mid-year due to the Great Recession. So the reason why I tell that story is we have reserves, we can get through it, we have hope, but it's still not a great place to be. We're so close to the edge on so many things, but we do have liquidity. We can get through the most difficult times, provided town meeting approves to use those funds and repurpose them. So I just want to make sure that's clear to everybody. I'm not just saying we're going to do something. It is everything we do is subject to an appropriation from town meeting.
Ed?
Yeah, a question about the road stabilization as it relates to overall stabilization and our reserves, which of course play a role in our bond rating. My understanding was road stabilization wouldn't be counted as ordinary stabilization for the purposes of bond rating because it does require a 2/3 majority to move from one purpose to another. Is that accurate?
Yeah, for bond rating purposes, we did our presentation because we had flexibility with the 2/3 vote to repurpose that money. It becomes really an extra revenue source in which to offset any downturns in the economy. If town meeting.
So, cash, right? We don't usually count the road stabilization fund as what our reserves are.
For liquidity purposes, we do not count it, but we
Okay.
certainly show the bond rating agencies that we have an evergreen fund that can be moved to another purpose and then back to the original purpose with the vote of town meeting. So no, we do not include it, but we talk about having that availability in the event of a catastrophe at our doorstep. Town meeting has that authority to repurpose that money.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to make this comment. I understand we are where we are with COVID and nobody knows what's going to happen come August when the state determines how much money they're going to give us for aid and frankly, how much money they're probably going to cut. That's one of those accounts where I would really caution us to be very, very careful for two reasons. Number one, we made a promise, and I was around, and all of us were around in 2014 when we asked the voters to pass that, and we swore to them that that was for roads. And I know that we would only be going back in an emergency, but I think what we want to remember is there is a portion of the populace for whom the road is the only interaction that they have with local government. They don't have kids in schools. They don't work here. Maybe they might not even have water, sewer. They might have a well. What they do know is they're going to get on the road, and a lot of the times the road stinks. And when we raise their taxes every year, as we assuredly will, with or without an override, a lot of these people look to us and say, well, what am I getting for the amount of money that I'm paying here? And a road really is the basic part. And I know nobody likes to kick the can down the road, but gosh, it's so ingrained in me that delaying capital increased costs later on, if we can all avoid that, we really, really ought to. So I would encourage us to go in with that mindset again. And I say this not knowing what state aid is going to be in August. It could be a real catastrophe. But that's sort of where my head's at as far as road stabilization goes.
Okay, any other questions? If not, I'll go to the questions we have here.
Just Jen, if I could, I want to dovetail on that because, you always have this, the expense side of the budget and the people who pay the bill. The board has complete control over the amount of money raised under that road stabilization. So you could offset the burden if it was too much and there were too many people that were unemployed and couldn't pay. You can not raise that full 1.5 at any time, usually in October, to do the roads in the ensuing fiscal year. So you have a lot of capacity to control that burden for folks as well. we should definitely do the roads. We should continue with that plan. But if you can't, because other things are priorities for the community, that flexibility is built in there. So I think those are all good things for us to look at and say, hey, we've built relief valves throughout for the homeowner, the property taxpayer, with amount you can raise and appropriate for roads, or reallocating that with the approval of town meeting. So none of those are easy things to do, but they're there as options, which a lot of other communities just don't have. So I think it's good for us to have those available.
Okay, I'm going to go to the first question. Tim, this is from Justin. Can Tim provide me and or the town specifically the document that shows those differences explicitly? I think, Tim, you had just mentioned you were going to write it up in a memo. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what he's saying. What's he looking for? What the town's reductions were to get closer to not using the 190 in the stabilization, or is he looking for the detail from the school department? I don't know what he's really asking.
The next part says, I can imagine that being very useful to be able to see in that format to have an informed vote at town meeting. I'm not sure exactly either. I think maybe the reductions you were talking about. Next question, Colleen Roy to Tim. Did you finalize the number from the rec department that could be used instead of those projects to reduce the burden the school needs to find?
No, I think it's 74,000, but no, I haven't put that into a proposal for us not to do those projects.
Okay. Amy Marr is reporting that the school committee voted tonight to approve the budget at $37,926,369, an increase of 3.67% over fiscal year 20. So I don't know if you.
That sounds like the number, so that's good. That's great.
Okay. Justin says he was asking about the budget difference between FinCom and your budget. I don't.
When we started the conversation, the finance committee had a different motivation in terms of not using stimulus, to use free cash and or stabilization. So when they reached out and told me what their reductions would be if I don't kind of have a conversation with them about that, then that's when we got to making reductions overall. So we were off, and now we're closer than we've ever been. So
Okay, last, we have a question from Lisa Rice. What was Tim's increase this year? Is it in line with Dr. Cummings' 1% this year? Tim took 0% this year.
I think Jay is in line with that as well. So I mean, all the leadership staff for me, unfortunately, for my staff and for Jay's leadership staff, are all at a 0 increase. So there's no pay increases to be had. That's what the discussion early on started on, then we moved off of it, and now we're back to that particular point.
Okay. Oh, I guess you meant the year we're currently in. I don't remember, Tim, what you got this year.
The year we're currently in, it would have been April, which would have been a previous fiscal year. So I don't know if it was 2%, it would be a guess. I can look. I don't know. But I haven't had a raise since last April. So I went a year and then I'll go another year. So it'll be a full 24 months before the board will have a chance to decide what my performance value is and then set a percentage up to 8.5% based on that performance. If I don't meet the performance or there's no money, just like I've done 3 other times in this whole 10, 11 years I've been here, there's been times where there's been 0. Not because of performance, but because there's been no money.
Okay. Will we push for will the push for parity continue in future years? I think that's a kind of a bigger discussion, but Peter, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I do. I think for the sake of just kind of, being all on the same page. I don't know how the committee feels. Maybe invite the school department in next Tuesday, just to kind of give an overview, like, hey, can you just share with us what's going on? I mean, typically when we get down to these types of things, we do participate in some impromptu meetings. I wouldn't necessarily call it a TRICOM committee, but just have them in there, have Jay come in and maybe present some of the particulars, because I see a lot of commentary jumping into our Q&A session tonight. And quite frankly, you know, I like to hear it from the horse's mouth. Not that I'm calling Jay a horse, but you know what I mean.
Okay, I'm fine with that. We can extend the invite. All right, Ed.
Yeah, just one thing before we move on. I listened to all of the Finance Committee meetings last week, and I want to give a shout out to them for doing the work that they did. This has been a challenging budget season for people who are listening at home. You know, maybe you don't know, but this was something that was supposed to be done. You know, the budget process starts in January, February. You end up going through warrant articles in April into May, and usually the stuff gets wrapped up in the middle of May. Obviously, with the COVID crisis going on, everybody's got things that they're thinking about otherwise. And everybody's a little bit stressed out, and everybody is a little bit on edge, I would say. And yet, the Finance Committee had came together and was able to work through their differences with the town administrator over what the budget is going to be, and about, you know, maybe arcane matters that most people don't really care about, the use of stabilization funds to fund this or that, whether or not one particular cost is going to be the operating budget or whether it's going to be in the capital budget. These are things that most voters don't really care about until they do. The use of free cash and stabilization for operating funds is a red flag indicator about how we're doing as a town. And I know that the Finance Committee had a difference of opinion with the town administrator about how that should work this year, about how certain expenses were going to be paid for, about you know, personnel increases, all the rest. And I also know that it has been taken as Bible truth in the past on this board that the Finance Committee ought to stay the heck out of it. And it's the purview of the town administrator only to make these determinations. I want to thank the Finance Committee and the town administrator both for working together and being willing to hash this out. Now, I know that at one of the meetings, some words were exchanged, and Tim, very gently, I'm going to suggest to you in my most professional tone, you ought to apologize for some of the things that you said. But at the same time, I want to thank you for taking the time to work with them to come up with a solution. It's frustrating for me as a type A personality not to have all the budget numbers done just 9 days before the town meeting, and I'm making adjustments to my own personality too right here. So I want to thank everybody for working together. Please continue to do that. But in the future, if we could all just lower the temper level, and I'm sure we'll get through this crisis just fine. Thank you.
I'm not going to respond to that, to keep my temperature low, because I do not feel like you should be lecturing us on that, but okay. We're going to go to meeting minutes.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I move the board vote to accept the meeting minutes of May 26, 2020 as presented.
Second.
we have a motion and a second for the meeting minutes. Any discussion? By roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Stock eye.
Fazio, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Thomas, aye. All right, the motion has carried. We just have adjournment.
Madam Chair, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor by roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Thomas, aye. All right, everybody, have a good
Good night.
night.